What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the At My Gardener channel. In today's episode, we're going to talk all about irrigation. We get asked all the time about using water in the garden and what is safe and what isn't safe. Should I use city water? Should I not? Should I use well water? Should I not? Should I make the jump and collect rainwater, or should I just use those other two options? Which one is best? I am so confused. If you sound a lot like that, well, this video is for you. We've had so many people that have been writing in asking about this because you're concerned. And I just realized the sun came out, which is a great thing, but not great for video quality. 1 second. All right, there we go. The sun is out. Like I said, it feels great. I am certainly not complaining, but sometimes it just messes with the lighting a little bit. So I'm glad you can see me better. So like I said, we're going to be talking about irrigation because it's something that a lot of people ask about. It's something that I know that a lot of people struggle with because they don't have safe sources for water. They might not have a well. They might not have rain. They might be forced to use city water. And we've been forced to use city water for many years. There's nothing wrong with using city water, but as I'll get into, we try to reduce our exposure to it for several reasons. And so I want to talk about those because city water is the first thing that I try to avoid if at all possible. It's not going to end your garden. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it should be something you try to avoid. The reason why is because city water, it's very expensive. Number one, it's costly. Depending on where you're at, water can be very, very expensive. So it can be costly to water your garden all the time. The second thing that city water has is city water has something called chlorine. Chlorine and chloramine are gases that cities will put in their water to remove any harmful pathogens. Harmful pathogens can wreak havoc on the body, and so in an effort to make water more potable, they add chlorine and chloramine. The problem is that chlorine, you use it in your pool, you use it in your washer, and to clean your clothes, to clean stains. And it is a very, very potent acid. And the problem is it has a tendency to kill soil life as well. If you use it in your garden, it can kill off soil microbes and bacteria just like it can in the water. It's meant to kill off pathogens, and so good or bad, it will kill. And so that's why chlorine and chloramine are not the best in the garden. Now, city water also has something in it called fluoride. Now, fluoride has been put in since, I think, the 60s, maybe a little bit earlier than that, 60s to 70s maybe, when they started to add fluoride to water to help with kids that are malnourished. They did that because the teeth use fluoride to strengthen the enamel on the teeth. And so they would do that in an effort to help out dental health. And the issue with that is that fluoride has been linked to many issues when it comes to soil microbes and bacteria, because fluoride will actually stop the reproductive cycle of so many different bacteria and fungi. Fluoride is not something that you want in your water. Now, will it completely kill your garden? Absolutely not. And like I said, we're hooked up to city water. We've used city water on our garden. I'm transparent enough to say that. But I only use it in an emergency situation because I try not to use fluoride, chlorine, and chloramine in my garden. Now, city water also has another thing, or may have another thing in your water that you don't want, and that is heavy metals. Heavy metals like lead, chromium, mercury, hopefully not mercury, but definitely things like lead and chromium have been found in city water. And depending on if your infrastructure is aging and not well kept, or if your house even has old pipes, you can have some lead contamination in your water, and you do not want that in your garden or in your body. And so depending on obviously the source, you can have some of that. Heavy metals are not great. They've been found to cause cancer. So none of this is to scare you. None of this is to scare you. Like I said, we use city water ourselves, and I don't love to use it, but I feel safe using it at least, and I don't feel like I'm causing any massive harm. It's used as an emergency situation only in very rare cases when we are having a super, super, super dry season and the plants are just desperate for it. So that's the only time I will use city water because of those things I've outlined. Now, is there anything you can do about it? What if you have no way of using any other option other than city water? Yes, you can use a water filter. Water filters they're expensive, but they do work. They can filter out things like heavy metals. They can filter out things like chromium. They can filter out things like lead. They can filter out even things like chlorine, chloramine, and fluoride. So you can take care of those issues with a water filter, but just know that you've got to get one, and you've got to get one that's very reputable. There's quite a few different options out there, but it can be another step to treating your water and making it safe. Now, okay, let's say you don't have city water, or you don't want to use city water. Well, do you have a well? Well water is the second best option because well water is usually fairly safe to use in the garden. It's usually fairly okay on soil microbes and soil, fungi and microbes and soil life like that. But it's not ideal in all situations. Well water can be what's called heavy. Heavy water means that it has a lot of minerals in it. Now, minerals you might think are great for the garden. However, depending on the minerals, it doesn't always work out so well, especially if you have sodium. Sodium is the worst mineral, and one that here in Michigan we actually come across a lot, believe it or not, because there are actually hidden salt deposits in the ground, and a lot of times the well water will mix in with some of these kind of salt layers, and you get a lot of salt water. Salt water, believe it or not, in Michigan. It's crazy. We're talking saltier than salt water. So much so that if you put it on your garden, it would kill it in an instant. It can be the worst thing in the garden. So you don't want salt water. You obviously know if you have salt water, just simply take a little sip if it's really salty, or simply do a water test. If it's got a lot of salt in it, avoid it at all costs. So that's one thing that well water can have. The next thing well water can have are things like calcium and magnesium. Again, these are mineral deposits that create those little like stalactites or whatever they're called, those little like mineral icicles on the bottom of your sink. And if you have a well, you probably know what I'm talking about. People use water softeners to soften their water, capture those minerals, and make their water a little easier to go through their drains, not as much buildup, stuff like that. But water softeners can also have an effect on the garden. So if you use water softeners in your well water, it's not ideal in the garden. Lots of mineral deposits and stuff like that, not ideal in the garden. Is it going to kill it? It depends. You want to test your water, you want to know what the source is, but it's not going to kill your garden, or it shouldn't kill your garden. And then finally, the final thing with well water is sometimes it can be very alkaline. Now, you do not want under any circumstance your water to be alkaline. It is not good for the garden at all. It will, over time, it will wreak havoc on plant health, plant stress, soil microbes and bacteria. They really do not like alkaline water, and that's because water that has a lot of calcium and things like that tends to be quite alkaline. Now, if you live on an artesian well, which is a well that has very, very clean, pure water that is very soft already, that is a very safe water source to use on your garden. So well water is fantastic. You just got to know the source. Now, the third thing that I love the most is rainwater. As you can see, we've got behind our beautiful kale it's still thriving, mind you. Behind our beautiful kale, we actually have a rain barrel. Now, it's just a 50-gallon rain barrel. It's not a whole lot, but we find it does get us by in dry periods, and we can use it on our garden, and it helps to really kind of just, like I said, kind of get us through those dry periods. But we use a rain barrel because rain is such an incredible resource. Number one, it's free. It comes from the sky, and I love free. The second thing is there's no heavy minerals. There's nothing like lead or chromium, mercury, or anything like that. There's no heavy metals in your water. So it's going to be great. It's going to be very, very safe to use in your soil. The next thing is it's usually, and I say usually because depending on where you're at, if you have a lot of air pollution, your water can be slightly acidic. It picks up sulfur and stuff from smog and air pollution, and it falls in the form of rain, acid rain. But you'll know typically from a basic pH test what your pH of your water is. But generally, more often than not, it's very neutral. And I love neutral water because it doesn't create any pH swings in your soil. It does not affect soil bacteria and soil health like acidic or alkaline water can. And so I love it for the fact that it's pH neutral. And finally, I love the fact that it can be stored. I just love the fact that you can have it in a rain barrel, you can store it, and you can wait for it to be used at a later time. You can't necessarily do that with city water or well water. It's kind of on tap. You got to turn it on, but the fact that I can store this high quality water is great. Now you do want to make sure you know your state and local laws. Some places, believe it or not, it's illegal to store water. As insane as that sounds, folks, it's true. So you got to be careful. You got to make sure you know your state and local laws, but make sure that you check on that because you don't want to get in trouble. But as far as we're concerned here in Michigan, totally fine. And so we have this hooked up to our gutters. Whenever it rains, our rain barrel fills up. We get some beautiful, awesome rainwater to use. Now, let's just say you don't want to use rainwater. Let's say you don't have a well and you're exclusively using your city water. You might say, well, I have to use my city water. How do you reduce your usage? How do you not use it all the time? The answer is in your gardening methods. We talk about all the time how we use high intensity gardening, meaning we plant a ton of plants closely together to protect the soil, reduce our evaporation that happens when the sun and wind hit our beds. So we use high intensity gardening. We also use, hey, where's my son? Come on, cloud. It's dark now. So we use high intensity gardening for that, but we also use core gardening. We bury straw in our beds to hold on to moisture like a sponge so that during dry periods the plants can use it. And then lastly, we try to really take care of the soil and use lots of compost and organic matter and humus, which helps to hold on to water in the soil like a sponge as well. And those three things help us to get through those dry periods so that only in the most rare cases do we have to water with our city water. And we find that when we do have to water, like I said, it might only be 1 to 3 times a year that we'll water with our city water. 1 to 3 times a year. And that might be, like I said, in the most rare of rare cases. So it really reduces the amount of impact that we have on our soil if we do have to water with city water. So use those things to your advantage. Take care of your soil. Use the right types of water if you can, and implement the right methods so that you don't have to water as often. All right, I'll catch you guys later. Grow bigger, go home, everyone. Remember to like, subscribe. The sun's coming out again, and that means I'm getting blasted. All right, grow bigger, go home, everyone. Bye. It looks like I'm entering heaven.